As we enter the month of February, it's time for speculation about a new Nintendo Direct to really start spiraling out of control, as there has seemingly been a pretty solid and consistent schedule found over the last few years since the return of Directs in 2021, where they happen in February, June, and September. Not to say that this pattern will forever remain in place, but yeah, that's why Direct speculation was bound to pick up around this time. This year, in comparison to the years though, just feels a bit different, and that's largely due to a big elephant in the room regarding expectations for Nintendo's 2024 plans. Along with recent further Twitter drops of a game and DLC that were expected to get a spotlight in that hypothetical Direct, and it just has to make you start wondering if they're opting to go a different route than in years past. I do think that we'll get a Direct in February, but I'm leaning towards it being a mini and or partner showcase right now after those recent developments. But that won't stop me from talking about predictions for this hypothetical Direct as if it were a full-fledged one. If you end up enjoying this video and want to see more Nintendo content like this, consider liking and subscribing. With that out of the way, let's get into the predictions. First off, I think it's important that we look at the potential time frame for when a February Direct could air. Directs tend to air on either Wednesdays or Thursdays, though it seems like Thursdays have become more common in recent memory. But another thing to consider is that the next notable release is the Mario vs. Donkey Kong remake, launching on February 16th, and Splatoon 3's Side Order DLC is not far behind, launching on February 22nd. Assuming that these games were to get showcased in this Direct, I'm sure that they want more than a day of time between the Direct and the release of MVDK, in order to allow that remake to come out in a state where the Direct isn't super fresh in everybody's minds. That being said, Nintendo usually gravitates towards the middle of February for Directs, so based on that tidbit, I decided to move the date up to where it wouldn't be too far away from that time frame, and my current prediction is that this Direct would air on February 8th, with the usual nugget of text saying that it's focusing on games releasing in the first half of the year, though that doesn't necessarily mean they won't talk about quite a few games releasing in the latter part of the year for Switch. That is, if there are any. Another thing that made me think is if Nintendo would go out of their way to explicitly state in the Direct announcement tweet that there would be no information regarding hardware, and they would strictly be focusing on games. It's something they did towards the end of the Wii U era, but I don't know if they do so quite yet, considering that there isn't much in terms of official acknowledgement of the production of the next system, even if everyone and their mother knows that they are indeed doing so. In terms of any form of news on the next console from Nintendo themselves and when it might happen, I'd just say pay attention to see if they actually bother participating in Summer Game Fest this year. I don't think they'd do it unless they had a new system to show at this point, and even then, they might not opt to go that route, because they could probably draw just as much buzz with a simple tweet or their own stream. But if they do indeed show their faces at SGF, then I think some form of console reveal is pretty likely there. With all that info gone over though, let's talk about what you people actually clicked on this video for. The games. To start, we're going to talk about the games we already know about. Begin with the games that have recently gotten extended looks and trailers dropped on Twitter. Those being the Mario vs. Donkey Kong remake, Princess Peach Showtime, and the Side Order DLC for Splatoon 3. All have already been dated and are releasing in under 2 months. After their recent information drops, I can't see anything more than just a simple reminder about the release dates of MVDK and Side Order, probably in a short game reel. To add on to Splatoon 3 though, I think that there's a chance we could see the trailer for the new season in this Direct, as the projected Direct date I mentioned earlier isn't that far off from when they usually drop the season trailers. Moving on to Showtime, I think that the release is far away enough that we might see a trailer in this Direct, especially since we haven't seen that much that tells us how exactly this game plays. Is it a platformer with puzzle elements? What exactly is it trying to be? The thing that's gotten the majority of attention is the different outfits for Peach, which look amazing, especially the recently revealed ninja and cowgirl costumes. I'd just like to see more in terms of direct gameplay so we can have a better idea of what to expect in that department. With those three out of the way though, we can now look towards predicting dates for the other two games we know about, along with predicting games they might reveal. The two games we know about but still need a date for are the remakes of Luigi's Mansion 2 Dark Moon and Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Starting with TTYD, I feel like this could be the headliner of the summer for the Switch, and it could be used to hold people over until possibly hearing more news about the new system, if we do hear about it by that point. Because of that, I think this game might have a release date roughly right before summer begins, and I think we could see a release window of somewhere around late May or early June for this remake. Luigi's Mansion 2, on the other hand, I really don't have a clue where they're planning to put this game on the schedule. I think a potential hint could lie in the timing of their official ratings from the ESRB, with Mansion 2 getting its rating just a bit before TTYD. This could possibly indicate that Mansion 2 will release just a bit before Thousand Year Door, and with Side Order releasing in February, I was completely blindsided, as I expected that to more or less be the big thing Nintendo would release in April. So with that spot opened up, I could see Luigi's Mansion 2 taking up, especially because I feel like any games of higher tier Nintendo IPs will be out on shelves by June, maybe early July at the latest. With that out of the way though, we've gone over all of the confirmed first party games releasing for Switch so far in 2024, but I definitely don't think that's all we're getting. Even if the Switch 2 gets announced for a holiday release this year, like most of us are expecting, they're still gonna put some games out for Switch to help tide people over until the moment arrives, and it raises some opportunities for Nintendo. When it comes to predicting any unannounced titles, I expect that this could be a year dominated by ports and remakes for Nintendo, where they port games from series that haven't seen a new game in a while as a way to test the waters for potential interest in those series in the future, or any of the few remaining games stuck on the Wii U. I highly expect these kinds of games to take up most of the remaining months of the Switch's lifecycle, filling up that period from July to probably early November. Before getting into that though, there's been one game that I think has potential to get some DLC, and even if this might be a bit late for it, I think there is a possibility we could see the announcement of DLC for Pikmin 4 that will be slated for release in early June, not long after the TTYD remake comes out. If the Luigi's Mansion 2 remake were to happen later in the month of April, then maybe I could see this hypothetical DLC being a decent in-between thing put out at the beginning of the second week of April, but I think that the remake would probably be closer to the middle of the month, and so I decided to put this prediction into the month of June, right before the other unannounced games. This segment of the video will be me spitballing a bunch of possible games that could come out in the later part of this year. I don't think all of them will actually happen, so at the end I'll give my final list of games that I expect. To start off, we already have 3 Mario spin-offs releasing this year, but you never know, there might be more in the works, and there's 2 realistic options for what this Mario spin-off could be in my eyes, those being Mario Party and Mario Baseball. When it comes to console releases, Mario Party has generally had a pattern of a new one releasing about every 3 years or so, which has held up ever since ND Cube took over development of the series with Mario Party 9 in 2012, with 10 in 2015, Super in 2018, and Superstars in 2021. If that pattern holds, then we're due for a new game in the series this year, which I think would come out around the same time as the other Mario Party games on Switch, releasing in the month of October. Looking at Mario Baseball, every Mario sports game on Switch has had roughly the same reveal to release timeline. Revealed in the Winter Direct, gets a trailer or 2 in between for the next few months, and releases in the month of June. This game would probably follow that same timeline, releasing later in the month of June. I think this one's the more likely option, as this one could be being worked on by Bandai Namco, as they did help previously with Mario Sluggers on the Wii, and they recently confirmed that there's been a studio for a bit now that's been primarily focused on developing games commissioned by Nintendo. So I could very well see this hypothetical Mario Baseball game being a real thing, and fitting into that late June release. Next up, it's a series I talked about before on the channel, and spoiler alert in advance, it likely won't be the last time, as I've wanted to see Rhythm Heaven on Switch for a long while now, and I'm honestly shocked it hasn't happened yet. There's quite a bit of demand there, and though people associated with previous games in the series seem to have since moved on to other projects, I still think that some newer faces could help in making a quality port of Fever or Megamix, although ideally they'd both be released in a collection together. As for the release timing, I don't really have a solid idea, so I'm just going based off of feel when I say that this kind of game just feels like a game that would release in July. Another series people wanted to get a new game for a while, but has more recently gotten crumbs of something new is F-Zero. F-Zero 99 released, and it feels like it just as quickly stopped being supported by Nintendo, so I feel like it's not a fair way to assess interest in the series. But based off of how loud cries for a new F-Zero game have been amongst Nintendo fans, I think there's a chance they might agree, and I've had other plans for F-Zero in the works. In terms of my prediction, I think this would be in the form of a remaster of F-Zero GX on the GameCube. I would guess that this game would be around an August release, right at the end of summer, as the holdover for the probably bigger September game. However, I think there might be another candidate for a game that could see a release in August, but this would be in the form of a new game, rather than a port or remake, with that being the Punch-Out series. This series has also gone over a decade without a new game, not having one since the earlier days of the Wii era, and though that game in particular is considered pretty good, and the series has its fans, there may be something to be said about the portrayal of certain characters, and how it doesn't really age all that well. And it's considered one of the bigger reasons this series hasn't seen a new game since. I think that there could be some ways to tone down the stereotypes of some of these characters to make it fit better for a modern generation, but if they would do it is another question entirely. If they did, then we could possibly see another game that reminds people why the series is a cult classic amongst the Nintendo space. Moving on to September, I feel like Nintendo might have been sitting on that Metroid Prime 1 remaster for a while, and I think that might not have been all in terms of Metroid Prime. I think that at some point there might have been plans for an HD Metroid Prime trilogy, as was very commonly stated by insiders back in the earlier days of the Switch's lifecycle. But they might have decided later on that they thought they could sell all 3 games as their own thing and maybe get more money out of it. Because trust me, Nintendo would put a high value on remasters of decade-plus old games. That being said, I think this could be a good time for a Prime 2 remaster if it does indeed exist, as a decently notable September game, as Nintendo generally does like having that holdover game for the big holiday season. Lastly though, we enter the month of October. I think this will likely be the last notable first-party game to be released exclusively for the Switch on launch. So what will close this legendary console generation off for Nintendo? Well, I had 2 ideas that came to mind. The first is a game in a series that has grown a lot over the past decade, but is generally the black sheep of the series, not helped by the fact that it's stuck on the laughingstock that is the Wii U. That game is Xenoblade Chronicles X. By this time, it'd have been a bit since we've seen anything Xenoblade related. That isn't DLC. There are parts of X that will need to be changed due to functionality with the gamepad and Miiverse, but I have no doubt that the dev team at Monolith could work it out and make a good port of the game to finally help it escape from its tragic fate of being trapped on a system that sold poorly. The other option? Well, how about we end this console generation the same way we started it? Well, in a way. Another long, but probably more loudly requested Wii U port is one of, or both, of the HD Zelda remakes on Wii U, in Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. If I had to guess, I'd probably say they'd opt to port Wind Waker HD, since it seems to be a much more highly regarded game among Zelda fans nowadays, and Wind Waker was stuck on the GameCube before its HD remaster, while Twilight Princess at least got to be on the Wii natively, along with its GameCube release. But either option would please many Zelda fans. If I had to give a guess, I'd probably say the Xenoblade X port would fit here more, because if those Zelda HD ports are indeed a thing, I'd guess that Nintendo would probably save them for around the launch of the next system, rather than at the end of the Switch's lifecycle, especially if there's no backwards compatibility. But that's all my predictions for first-party games at this theoretical February Nintendo Direct. There could be more, there could be less, but this is what my predictions are. In terms of third parties, it's hard to say for certain, but based on the happenings at the Game Awards, I'd assume Sega having at least one of their games there is a safe bet, along with a random licensed game, and maybe one more Square Enix RPG for the road, if I had to give out any safe predictions. But with those out of the way, here's my final predicted schedule for the Switch's 2024 in terms of first parties up to October. Before we go though, I thought it might be interesting if I try to throw one really out there prediction for any time I do a direct prediction video. And so for this one, how about an official localization of Captain Rainbow that would release in August? There is some notability there amongst Western audiences from its multiple references in Smash games, so I think that there could be some ideas of that game coming to the West that have existed within Nintendo at some point. But at the end of the day, it's all just random speculation. What do you think we might see at this hypothetical direct? Will it be a general, mini, or partner showcase? Will we even get one at all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.